Have you ever scrolled past an NFT and just wondered, how does that even work? How does a simple digital image become a valuable, ownable asset? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on the Cardano blockchain to see exactly how these digital assets get forged from the ground up. Right? We've all seen the headlines, the crazy prices for digital art. But if you look past the hype, there's a really basic question. How does an idea, just an idea, become a secure, verifiable asset on a blockchain? That's the mystery we're cracking open in this explainer. So, to understand how Cardano pulls this off, we have to start with its core philosophy. You see, it does things a little differently. It doesn't just bolt tokens on top of its network, it builds them right into the very foundation. This is what's known as the native approach. And this really gets to the heart of it. On many other blockchains, to create a token, you have to write a whole separate program called a smart contract. It kind of sits on top of everything. And that works, but it's an extra layer of complexity, which means more opportunities for bugs. Cardano just sidesteps that whole problem. Native tokens are built directly into the blockchain's main rulebook, the ledger itself. The ledger already knows how to handle them, which makes the whole thing simpler, more direct, and just fundamentally more secure. This is the key concept to hang on to. A native asset is a first-class citizen. I love that phrase. It's not an afterthought or an add-on. The Cardano ledger treats a custom token with the exact same logic and security as its own main currency, ADA. And that equality is what makes the whole system so powerful. Okay, so if these tokens are built right in, what are they built from? Well, before you can forge anything, you need a blueprint, right? A plan. And what's really cool is that for a digital asset on Cardano, that blueprint is surprisingly simple. It really just comes down to two core parts. And this is where you can see the elegance of the system. It doesn't matter if you're creating 1,000,000 identical coins for a game or one single unique piece of digital art. The starting point is always the same. It all boils down to two key identifiers. First up, you've got the asset name. This is exactly what you think it is. It's the public name like Gold Coin or Level Up Potion. But here's the interesting part. This name doesn't have to be unique. I could create a token called Goldcoin, and you could create a token called Goldcoin. So how in the world does the system tell them apart?
That's where the policy ID comes in. This is the real deal. This is the token's true unforgeable identity. It's a unique code that's generated from a set of rules, the minting policy, that you, the creator, get to define. A great way to think of it is like a serial number from a specific factory that also has the factory's production rules built into it. This policy ID is what makes your gold coin verifiably different from anyone else's.
All right, so we have our blueprint, the asset name, and that all-important policy ID. Now it's time for the main event, minting. This is the actual act of taking that blueprint and forging it into a real, live digital asset on the blockchain. So the journey of creation looks kind of like this. First, you generate your keys, which are like your unique digital signature. Then, you define that minting policy, the set of rules we just talked about. Next, you craft a transaction that bundles all this information together. And finally, you use your keys to sign it, to authorize it, and you submit it to the network. Once it's confirmed, boom, your asset officially exists. Okay, so now we know how to make a basic token. But what's the secret ingredient? What's the bit of magic that transforms it into a one-of-a-kind, non-fungible token, an NFT? You know, the fascinating part is that from a technical perspective, an NFT is still just a native asset. The magic isn't in some special technology, it's all in the rules that we apply when we create it. And this side right here, this is the secret sauce. It all comes back to that minting policy. For a regular fungible token, the policy might say something like, hey, the person with these keys can mint as many of these as they want whenever they want. But for an NFT, the policy is incredibly strict. It says, the person with these keys can mint exactly one of this token, and after that, this policy is locked forever and can never be used again. That one simple rule is what creates verifiable digital scarcity. So we have uniqueness, and we have scarcity. But what about the art itself, the story behind it? That's all attached as metadata. It's a little snippet of data included in the minting transaction that links the token to its name, a description, and a URL pointing to the image file. And that's usually stored on a decentralized network so it can't just be deleted. Honestly, you should think of it as the NFT's digital birth certificate. So we've gone through the how, but it's just as important to understand the why. Why go to all this trouble to create native tokens in the first place? Well, the benefits are pretty significant, especially when it comes to security and just how efficient they are. This comparison makes the advantages really clear. Because Cardano's main ledger handles the token logic directly, it wipes out a whole class of bugs that can show up in custom smart contracts. Transfers are just simple transactions, not complex code executions. And that simplicity often means lower, more predictable fees, since you're not paying extra gas to run a complicated program for a simple transfer. The source material puts it perfectly. Creating and transacting tokens natively removes the possibility of human error, since the ledger itself handles the token logic. It's not about adding security on later, it's about having security by design from the very beginning. Ultimately, this whole native approach isn't just a technical detail, it's a fundamental shift that makes creating and managing digital assets more accessible and way more secure for everyone. And it leaves us with a really fascinating question. When you can securely represent ownership of anything this simply, what are we going to tokenize next? Concert tickets, property deeds, personal data? The possibilities are just getting started.